Anything in mind?
No, I'm open.
All right, we'll go open, and we'll play a little chess while we're at it.
Why not?
If you're
Not
okay.
that I can remember the rules. It's been
All right.
a decade or two since I played.
Better for me then. Welcome to the Ride Boundless podcast. I'm here at the bike shed in Los Angeles. I'm sitting with Dutch, one of the owners, founders, bosses, all of the above. How you doing today, Dutch?
I'm okay. I'm a bit tired.
Yeah?
And if anybody sees a weird eye, I popped a blood vessel in my eye.
No, you blocked it off perfectly. I see it.
That's why I'm on this side. So I look pretty weird.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. How did you pop a blood vessel?
I don't know. I did it once before, lifting weights. And then I did it another time, having a really big argument with my cousin. So somewhere between being cross and lifting something heavy, just went.
Now, you're open to anything. So
Yeah.
my first curiosity is going to be like, okay, lifting, eye vessel, you're a vegan, right?
Mostly. Yeah, I like to say
Mostly.
I'm plant-based because vegan always sounds like a political statement.
Yeah.
And I eat mostly raw, whole plant food because I think we're made that way.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion. I don't expect other people to follow it.
Yeah.
And if I want a steak, I'll have one.
Yeah. It changes every few months. Even water. Like I was hooked on the whole alkaline
Oh, you don't want to
thing.
drink water. That's very dangerous.
Yeah. No, you don't.
Die.
No. Not that. But like now, I was like hooked on the alkaline waters. Now they're saying alkaline water is not. It's good for a while or sometimes, but you're better off drinking spring water or waters that have minerals in it because that's what your body absorbs and blah blah blah. So it's like even something as simple as water. Eat eggs. Eggs are great for you. Oh, eggs are bad for you. Cholesterol. Like it just changes all the time.
I've got a good go-to for that.
Yeah.
So my go-to, because I love reading history,
Right.
anything from Noah Yuval Harari through to the Bill Bryson book, A Brief History of Nearly Everything, and stuff about sort of the ascent and arrival of man and who we are and how long we've been around, there's still a lot of controversy about that. Are we 150,000 years old? Are we 3,000 years old as Homo sapiens? The go-to that I have is we've only been farming for 10,000 years, and we've only really had the diet we have now for about 100. So whenever I'm confronted by some doctor or some new book or some quack telling me what to eat or not to eat, I go, what was true 50,000 years ago? Because we've evolved from the previous Homo erectus into this body. Same body as 150,000 years ago, for argument's sake, just wearing clothes and not in a cave. So whatever they did, whatever they drank, whatever they ate, whatever they did, when they slept, what they did with their bodies, how much exercise they got, if we do that, that's what we're built for. And so anybody that tells me anything that contradicts that, I'm like, well, show me the evidence.
Oh, I agree with you.
And the reason I started eating plant-based food was not because I think everybody should be plant-based. And it's not about what you don't eat.
Right. It's
not about giving up this or giving up that. I mean, there are lots of discussions around whether or not cooked animal products are good for you or whatever, and that people will believe what they want to believe. It's really more to do with the fact that I know I've not eaten healthy food for a long chunk of my life. I'm 57, and for 50 years
You look amazing.
For 57, I paid attention to health through exercise, and I paid no attention to health through diet, and I probably drank too much, and I certainly ate too much fat and did a lot of keto type stuff, and kind of didn't really eat plants and kind of raw food and fiber, and I just, having tried it a few years ago, eating loads and loads of plants works for me personally, and I feel so much better. I feel so good on it, and my body works better in every way, especially in the gym or in kind of physical life, that I feel like I'm undoing 50 years of it. If I'd started being a bit more like this when I was 30, I probably wouldn't be so into it, if you see what I mean. I'd be a bit more balanced. But yeah, I just look to history. Like what?
Well, it makes sense. I mean, that's what the whole paleo diet's all about, right?
Well, it was, but then they changed paleo. Because when they first talked about paleo diets, and I read about this, it was interesting. They went to these Paleolithic sites and these caves, and look, there's a fire and there's bones, and these guys, they ate meat. It was all meat, and it was amazing, and that was paleo diet. And then they got the electron microscopes out a few years later and went, oh, wait a minute, there's loads of organic debris in the dust, but it's microscopic and we couldn't see it because, carrots don't fossilize, so, it's really difficult to see evidence of that. But a lot of the evidence now is that Paleolithic man mostly ate beans and plants. But in our minds, from the marketing of the 80s and the 90s, we think they just ate meat because it sticks. Humans, we're a meme culture for a reason.
Right.
We remember shorthand. We're often too busy and too unfocused to dig deep into anything. So, we remember stuff that's decades old, or learning it decades ago that was decades old at the time. When you and I were at school, we probably learnt about tectonic plate shift. Well, now they've changed all of that. They don't think plates shift anymore. They think it's more like a conveyor belt. So we've got conventional wisdom about how the Earth moves and how the Earth's crust moves. And now it's all different.
And the axis.
But we still remember what we learned. We're all caught in a little time capsule of what we learned when we were most easily influenced. And shortcuts to knowledge are memes. So we remember the top line. And I think it's one of the problems we face as humans in a complex world.
My biggest problem that I think really screws it up and fucks it up for everybody is the marketing. Like if you go back to the 90s, milk does the body good.
Yeah.
All these lactose intolerant kids were being shoved milk into their body. And I grew up on milk. I love milk. But I had friends that were struggling with it. And the doctor says, you got to drink more milk. And you got to do this. It's like, wait, hold on, time out. Like, it's not good for everybody.
Because there's a milk marketing board.
Because
it's an industry.
But same thing, now there's proof that, in the 1940s and 1950s, the sugar industry had a big influence on saying eggs, butter, and breakfast and meat is bad. Eat cornflakes, eat Kellogg's, eat this. And they did this whole campaign. Now, if you look at the pyramid and the good foods that they have right now, Lucky Charms made it. Lucky Charms is on the nutrition food.
Which is about 30 years old, that pyramid. And also it's created...
No, the new one.
Oh, the new one.
The new one. Lucky Charms is in there. Milk-covered almonds is on there. And this is like healthy stuff. And you're like, well, wait a minute. And the fact that the market, that it's even breakfast, if you think about breakfast, again, what you said, I go back to 500 years ago. They weren't waking up and having breakfast. Sometimes they would go 2-3 days without food. Because they had to hunt and they had to gather. And actually, I have a rebuttal for your vegetables and your vegetables and greens. Now there's studies saying that vegetables should be steamed or cooked, and your body can process it much better than if it was not. What's your opinion on that? Because back 500 years ago...
I'm not a scientist, but what I would say is for
do you eat mostly
149,000 years, people weren't steaming their vegetables. So what happened? Were humans awful?
Right, that's a good question.
We're evolved to live on a diet that's available.
Right.
We're not evolved to live on a diet that's better than what's available.
Right. And then my rebuttal to that would be, well, who fucking knows? Because there's a lot of people living off junk food right now. And they get, you hear the stories, guy 60 years old, eats bacon, drinks beer, smokes cigarettes, and makes it somehow. And I don't get that either.
Yeah, well, you do hear those stories. I had a grandmother who drank, gin every night and smoked 2 packets of cigarettes a day, and she made it till 80, and she was amazing. And then she just dropped dead, and you go, great life. But the thing is, what you see every day on the streets is very, very unhealthy people who look unwell. And also a kind of an attitude that as you get older, you should give up on your body and your health. I mean, I know so many people my age who've got heart problems, angina, they're overweight, they're on statins, they're on pre-diabetic medicine. And they kind of accept that it's either in their genes, which isn't right because epigenetics is more powerful than genetics. What you do with your genes is more powerful. But also this kind of idea that that's kind of okay because you're older. Years ago,
they accept it,
Yeah, years ago I had a nerve pain problem with my left leg and I couldn't run on a treadmill for quite a while. And I lost coordination. I did something. I pinched a nerve or something in my neck. And then I went to see the doctor, and I'm 35 years old, and I said, I can't run a 6-minute mile anymore on the treadmill. And she looked at me and she said, well, at your age, you shouldn't expect to run a 6-minute mile.
What?
Like maybe you should do something else. And I'm looking at her thinking, well, you don't look a picture of health and you're a doctor and you're telling me that age 36, I shouldn't be running. There are people in their 70s who do marathons. I'm not going to say, oh, well, I'm now retired from being a human that can run. But her attitude was, I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. And I think we live in a society that accepts, as you get old, being forgetful, being infirm, making noises when you get up and get into a chair and go, ugh. We kind of live with that. We kind of go, that's okay. And it isn't okay. It's really not okay that we totally accept that as being...
Oh, it's terrible.
Completely normal when there are so... If you want to get into it, there's a fun piece of light science on TV called Blue Zones, and it's all about places in the world where people routinely live to 100 years old, and then it looks at their lifestyle and how how they live, what they do, their social environment, their level of exercise, their food. And then it comes to a bunch of conclusions about why people in these particular towns and villages around the world, in places like Sicily and Greece, Costa Rica, there's one in California, and Okinawa, why they live that long. And you see that they all have the same 5 or 6 qualities, all to do with health, lifestyle, and diet. But those people are walking and running, and they're slim and healthy. And so I think we have this kind of culture that's not very savvy about what we expect. It's normal to just be a mess over 40. And the Western solution to that is medication.
Which is terrible.
It's either go to the gym more, which kind of is okay, but caveman didn't go to the gym. He walked about all day and picked things up off the floor and climbed trees and did stuff. He didn't lift 5 times his own body weight or run a full mile.
There's different gyms, obviously, Like if you're doing a little easy cardio, swimming some laps, lifting some light weights, it makes sense.
But we're dudes who think that muscles rule. I mean, I'm still an idiot who lifts weights because I think I look better because I'm a skinny guy.
Well, they're saying that's good for men in their 40s and getting older because that stops the aging process. Because what happens with the aging process, muscle fibers start breaking down, bone density starts breaking down, all these things come into play. And now, again, new studies, I don't know how accurate they are, but they're saying people that physically lift weights, again, not hurt yourself and not kill yourself, have better results and are aging better and have more strength and have more energy. They're seeing benefits to people that are lifting weights.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say from personal experience, I feel better lifting heavy things and feeling strong. It's a nice feeling. But I think, honestly, when I was in my 30s, my goal was to look cool. My goal wasn't health. Now I can see the outcome is health.
Right.
And I think it's all to do with the fact that we're so aesthetically driven. We're so driven by the external and perception. And what I'm trying to do now as I get a bit older is think about my internal health. How healthy are my cells? How good is my DNA? How long are the telomeres that are wrapped all my DNA together? What's my physical health like? I mean, I've just been, because I've just joined the American healthcare system. So I had my Kaiser Permanente health check and I got all my blood work back. And after 3 years of taking care of what I put inside my body, all my bloods are like normal for a 30-year-old. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I've got no issues with cholesterol, no issues with blood sugar, got no issues with any of that stuff. So it's kind of, is that all working?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I feel like it's paying off.
Yeah, of course.
But really, I don't want to get too into it because I don't want to preach about it.
Right. No. We're having a casual conversation.
At the end of the day, I'm just at a place in my life where I'm thinking, I don't want to be as old as my friends my age who are old.
Right.
And age is not a disease. It's not an illness. We have loads of illnesses that create the perception of age. But your body will keep going until something kills it or makes it ill.
Yeah.
And maybe as you get older, things like popping a blood vessel in your eye will happen more often, or you'll have other issues. But at the end of the day, I don't want to accept age at this time. I've got a lot of things to do, so I'm trying to stay on top of it. And if I can stay healthy, I can do more. I have more focus, more energy. I can do more business. I can get more stuff done. I can have a better relationship. All of those things just work better.
Yeah. A few things I want to add to that. One, the aging's not a disease. It's interesting because I was listening to an interview from Elon Musk maybe 5-6 years ago. And, you always hear about the fountain of youth and what's the fountain of youth. And he was talking about it briefly, and he goes, the problem with aging is a disease. I know you just, because he goes, aging is a disease that we've all accepted, that we are all just gonna, get gray hair and we're gonna get old and our bone structure, this, that. But I'm always thinking of ways of how to, by calling it a disease, because if you don't call it, in this example, if you don't call it a disease, you're trying to create the fountain of youth. Now that sounds ridiculous, but what if scientists started focusing on, like Elon Musk, and says, what if we can cure this aging disease? What if we can find the medicine that says, well, hold on, the hairs don't have to turn white. We don't have to age. And the problem, and the reason he's so interested in it, he goes, the average man, we'll just say man for right now, is at his wisest and smartest and controls his patience and his drinking, everything, at the age of 50. So we start getting these quality men that finally have their life together, their finances, they're not going to get into bar fights, they're balanced. And then how much time do they get? 20 years?
Well, here's a really interesting thing then. So I've been on this subject for a little while just because I'm 57. So it comes up with guys like you. We have these conversations. And I always used to love the phrase, youth is wasted on the young. Because what do young people know, right? They've got all this amazing youth and energy, and they're idiots.
Yeah.
And I kind of flipped that a couple of weeks ago. I was like, wait a minute, wisdom is wasted on the old. If we allow our bodies to age, where our brains are foggy and we drink too much alcohol and our arteries get clogged up and we have poor cognition, a lot of that's to do with cholesterol in the brain and all kinds of stuff where those tiny capillaries get blocked up in the brain and other places before they affect your heart. If we waste our wisdom and our knowledge and our experience on forgetting it and bad memory and ill health, then wisdom is wasted on the old.
Wisdom is wasted.
And in response to sort of the age being a disease thing, I think if we want to generalize, it's an interesting idea.
It's an idea, of course.
But when you look at the writings of somebody like, there's Dr. McGregor, is it David McGregor? Who wrote How Not to Die, which is quite an interesting book if anybody wants to read an interesting book.
How Not to Die.
And what he does is, he actually says age isn't a disease. What kills you, there are 16 things in America that are the highest causes of death. And at the top is heart disease. And heart disease is basically fat in your arteries around your heart that stops your heart working.
Right, the bad fats.
So it's not actually your heart has got a disease. It's to do with fat in your arteries. And by the way, it's all over your whole body when it's in your heart.
Right.
Your heart is your biggest veins and arteries. So when it's there, it's everywhere. It's in your fingertips. It's like, at all your extremities. And so he says, well, how do we not get that? And then he goes, right, well, now let's look at diabetes. How do we not get diabetes? Now let's look at, lung disease. And he takes the top 16 things that kill you and then says, with diet and lifestyle, here's how you don't die of these things.
Right.
And for example, heart disease is entirely reversible. Anyone who's got heart disease, you can choose to be on sort of blood thinning medication and various other things. But if you stop eating bad food and fat, your body will get rid of it and your heart and your arteries will recover. And it might take a long time or it might take less time, but it will recover. And the same with being pre-diabetic. And there's a lot of confusion over that as well, because diabetes is again caused by LDL cholesterol blocking insulin's access to your cells to allow the sugar in. So the insulin is like a key that opens your cells, and the cholesterol blocks the insulin from working properly. So you build up sugar in your bloods. The insulin isn't working properly, and then that has chaotic sort of outcomes for the rest of the way your body functions, because you're not supposed to have all this sugar in your blood. And he explains how to just deal with all those things. So he looks at the overall effect of age as being all these slow burning illnesses that start from when you're a kid, based on what you ingest and how you live, diet and lifestyle. And then says, well, how do you undo that? And how early can you start? So I think the whole thing is, it's a little bit like having a motorcycle, isn't it? Like, you ride a motorcycle, and if you don't change the tires and sort of lubricate the chain and
change the oil,
if you don't do all the things that a motorcycle needs and service it, over time, something is going to make the bike break down. Right. You might snap a chain, your tire may explode on the freeway.
And that causes the accident.
And that causes the accident, or the death. And so I think what he's doing is he's looking at all these different things and going, which is the thing that's going to get you? And by the time you're 100, something's going to get you, right? But it really what you want is you want to think of how healthy can I be for as long as possible. And he talks about health span, not lifespan. I mean, if you live to 70, but the last 30 years of your life, you're in a wheelchair or you're hobbling about and you're hugely overweight and out of control and not living a good life, you're not really living.
Yeah.
So I'd rather live till 60 and then drop dead, but have a great life.
Of course.
And so I think I'm in that mode of health span, and I'm not... And
it's a great mode to be
I'm not Elon Musk, I'm not a scientist, I'm not the font of all knowledge. I just read stuff and I try stuff. And I'm not any guru on the subject. I'm just
what I took out of that statement was, if, as a scientist, if you say aging is a disease, we're not talking about health. We're talking about just the aging part of everything. We're not talking about how you age and what you did. But if the approach was, aging is a disease that we've all accepted, But if we can cure this disease, then we've created the fountain of youth.
Yeah.
You know, without saying there's a fountain that you go outside and you dip yourself and...
I think the challenge I've had more of that, if you say aging's a disease, which bit of aging?
Right, exactly.
Because is it your weight? Is it your cholesterol? Is it your blood sugar?
I
I think that's why you can't find a cure for 100 different things that contribute to aging,
Right.
because it's not one thing. I mean, a lot of physical aging in senescent cells and your telomere length, which is what makes your DNA, when your DNA replicates itself in cell division, when your telomeres, which are kind of like the bit on the end that holds your DNA together, it's like the tip of a shoelace
Right.
that holds it all. When the telomeres get too short with constant replication, the cells don't reproduce properly.
Of course.
And they die. And that's the actual genetic process
Right.
of aging.
That's...
Now that's a thing. And that is a thing which I think is going to get really scary, because I think they're going to use things like CRISPR to mess about with your DNA, because there are certain compounds that actually clean the DNA up, and telomerase, I think I'm saying that right, is a thing that lengthens your telomeres. And you can stimulate that, for example, by cold plunges. And there are lots of stuff around that where they're going to get...
cold plunge?
I used to. I don't like it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I know cold plunge is good for you, but I really hate being cold. So if I'm with a bunch of buddies and we're doing the cold plunge, I'm in.
Right.
And Vicky loves doing it. And I spent time on holiday with our friends in Bali, and we did cold plunge every day after a sauna. But if I'm on my own, I don't do it because I don't like it. So hand up, I'm just a wuss and hate it. But I'm pretty sure it's good for me.
Yeah. No, a new study came out on the cold plunges. Amazing, obviously. Your testosterone, everything. It's a refresher. It wakes you up, gives you more energy than anything. The new study was saying it's better if you do it before a workout. It's better if you wake up, do it, and then force your body to heat up, and the results are they're like 100 times multiplier, which is amazing. Because a lot of people are doing it after workouts.
Yeah.
But then they were saying you still get a lot of benefits, but it was really bad for muscle growth. So if you're like hitting the gym and stuff, and then you jump into the cold, energy-wise, and I think still the testosterone part of it is good, but for muscle parts, it's really bad.
I read the same thing. And what worries me is I saw that on Instagram.
Yeah.
And
I saw it on a podcast where a doctor
and so for me,
broke it down.
podcast has probably been turned into a really good piece of Instagram. And my problem is I'm I'm hearing too much on short format, unsubstantiated, tailor-made for me algorithm.
Right.
And it really bothers me. I'm beginning to trust it less and less. And this kind of makes me nervous, because if I'm learning too much about the world through 5 lines and 3 graphics, I'm not really studying, which is why I'm trying to complement stuff with books. I mean, the thing I read, there's a book called Life Force, I think it's called Life Force, which is all about the natural things that stimulate cell regeneration and telomerase. And they talk about cold plunges as being one of the things that puts your body under mild stress. So when your body is under mild stress, we generate hormones which run around mopping up cell damage, and in including promoting the production of telomerase, which I think we can make it ourselves as well as ingest it or ingest the precursors to it. And what it actually does is it lengthens the life of your cells. And so for people who do things like marathons and people who swim and people who are healthy, their cell age can be much lower than people who have a sedentary life. So if you've got somebody who's been an Olympic athlete all their lives and they've been a long distance runner, at the age of 40, their cell age might be 30.
Right.
Because by being under constant stress, their telomeres have maintained their length, and so their DNA is more secure, and they have less cell death. So, and that stuff was very much about molecular science and long-term studies. So it's just that balance between how do we learn stuff? How do we learn anything? How do we learn about politics? How do we learn about right and wrong in the world when everything is delivered in this kind of 3-line, 2-graphic meme culture? And
it's hard. And
the more I hear stuff, the more I've decided, unless I've read it in 3 books, I don't know shit.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying, because I came to the exact same conclusion with these stupid, because of the podcast and because of my account and because, the influencer thing, people send me these little snippets of like how to boost your social media. If you do this, and if you put this song, and if you put this title, and if you put this sentence, and if you use this hashtag. And I've seen so many of those that I just realized they're all bullshit. What it is it's content that people will share.
Yeah.
But that advice does not work, because I have done it. I have duplicated it. I've used it. I've reused it. I've tried it with 4 different pages to see if there was different results. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. So then I started thinking about, well, wait a minute. If I have like 15 people, 10 people sending me these similar posts, hey, Robert, listen to what this person said. That video succeeded in being shared and liked, and it succeeded in getting the attention, but the information that they're delivering is not true.
Because we live in attention society.
And we live in an attention society where people are not even exercising or reading 3 books to even verify that the information. So the problem is you get these little 2-sentence, catchy things delivered into your feed, and then people just live off that information, which is interesting. But again, when it comes to certain podcasts, because I listen to so many podcasts, I've seen those clips, but I've also heard the whole interview, and I know the background of that doctor and stuff, and it gives me a little bit more confidence, if it makes sense.
Well, that's where editors come in. If you trust the podcast interviewer and you think that they're going to have interesting people worth listening to, you're going to pay more attention to the soundbite.
Of course. So, and then another fun fact about the whole people's health that just blew my mind away. This is the first time in the existence of human that poor people are fat.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? Well, I think
weird.
If I was reading Noah Yuval Harari's got a great book called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And this is the era where more people are killed by Haribos than bullets. Sugar kills more people
100%.
than war. And more people die from overeating than undereating. So more people are killed because they're overweight than die of starvation. Now, think about that existentially. Think about that as your kind of, let's say there's some aliens up there now, since everybody seems to think there are some aliens up there now.
Do you?
I have no fucking idea.
Yeah.
I did see a UFO when I was 14, but that's another story. But to me, it's kind of like, you've got to explain that on this sort of planet where there's so much kind of inequality and poverty, but more humans actually die of obesity than from starvation.
Fucking ridiculous.
And that more people are killing themselves. I think more people die from suicide than from violence. So more people kill themselves than are killed by others.
Fucking wild.
I mean,
and more people die of the sugar thing than any other thing, period.
I mean, and you kind of look at, I remember when COVID started, and if we want to go down a COVID rabbit hole, and I remember kind of reading that this many million people could die, and I was thinking, and I did some Googling, and it was like in the UK, 4.2 million people had type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes was one of the biggest contributors to early death and a strain on the National Health System, National Health Service in the UK. And I'm thinking, well, people are worried about a really bad flu, and we're willing to stop the economy to deal with it. But we're not willing to do anything about people literally giving themselves diabetes. So one's a public health crisis, which is actually a naturally occurring cyclic phenomenon, which is a really awful virus, which is going to target the weak. And that's awful. I'm not saying that's okay.
Yeah.
But the other is something completely within our control that we can do something about with good legislation, good education, and good programs to look after people. And yet we're not doing anything about that. And that one actually kills more people and is long-term and is ongoing and getting worse. And
but that one's profitable, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the
I hate to say it, but...
Well, if you ever see the documentary called The Social Dilemma, and it's about social media.
I did.
And it basically says, if you're not paying for content, you're the commodity, you're the content. So if you don't pay, then someone else is paying to have access to you. You're a user 645892B, and they know you like
creating that
shoes,
avatar.
and they know you like watches, and they know you like motorbikes. So boom, somebody's paying a lot of money to serve ads to you, and you're the commodity. And I think the truth is, when it comes to health and when it comes to food, which is part of health, if there are big companies and lobbies profiting from you having medicine and eating certain foods that are farmed at scale, there's no way their view on telling you what you shouldn't or shouldn't do is subjective.
Yeah.
It's no way is it subjective.
At all.
Because they have an agenda.
Of course.
And
even the doctors, even your doctor.
Yeah.
How do you look at your own doctor, out of shape, looks old, looks beat up? Yeah, okay, he's got a doctor's degree, but he doesn't have a nutrition degree. You don't have to learn nutrition to be a doctor.
They don't
telling you what to eat, how to eat. This is good. Oh, you're eating all vegetables? That's bad. Oh, you're eating all meat? That's like, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They look like shit. I'm sorry. It's not all doctors, but they look like shit. And it's like, these are the people that are giving us advice. You know, I'm going to brag. I know this is going to sound bad, but this was a happy moment in my life. I'm driving on the freeway with my 4-year-old, and my 4-year-old sees McDonald's, and he goes, "Look, Papa, McDonald's." And I go, "Yeah, that's McDonald's." He goes, he's going to be 5 next month. He goes, "What do they serve at McDonald's?"
Nice.
And I said, "Junk, garbage." And he goes, "Gross." Now, that moment, I was like, I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
I have a 5-year-old that's never been at McDonald's. No fast food.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not like I programmed like no. I mean, I did, but it was like I want to give them the best things I can give them. You know, and that was just like a good moment. But the point is the doctors don't know better in a sense for nutrition. The schools are not really teaching anything better. They're giving shitty food and breads and, you know, chocolate milks that are not organic, whatever the case is. Parents, they're doing whatever is kind of affordable, I guess, in a sense. Like it's a big problem, man. Like most Americans are, 80%, 90% out of shape?
Yeah, and they say that this is the next generation is the first generation that will live a shorter life than their parents, which is awful to imagine. I can't remember the statistics on how many people in America will be diabetic by 2050, but I think it's close to 50%. That's terrifying. And all of these things are fixable through education and through good policies.
But they don't want to. What's the agenda? I don't get this.
I always feel like there's always going to be this kind of elite group of people that know what they should and shouldn't do and have amazing doctors and geneticists and probably go to Brazil and get stem cells and stuff, and they don't care.
Have you done that stem cell treatment or anything ever?
No, I haven't. But I don't know enough about it. And
what about HGH or any of that stuff?
no,
I've
I'm
heard miracles.
really interested in some of that sort of stuff, especially around some of the, I can't remember the names of everything now. I was reading about it about a year ago. And there are a lot of these kind of peptides, which are kind of precursors to various things. And there's NMN and a few other things that are precursors to things which promote cell regrowth and cell regeneration. And again, telomere length enhancement and things. And a lot of those things are kind of untested. There's a diabetic medicine as well, which I've completely forgotten the name of, which they found accidentally prolongs life. So people who are diabetic on this
accident,
and they go, wait a minute, why are these people living on average a bit longer? And they realize that they're all taking the same drug, and now people are trying to get that for sort of length of life rather than for diabetes. So people are getting a false prescription for being pre-diabetic when they're not. And this conversation is useless if I can't remember the name of the drug.
No, but still gives people motivation to research it and Google it.
But I don't know. I think
it's still awareness.
I mean, this whole kind of environment we're in and the conversation it's kind of caused between us is we're in this really weird time in humanity where we have a limited amount of capacity to retain information. I mean, I can't remember the name of the drug I was reading about a year ago. And we're saturated with opinions and views and ideas delivered in short form without any depth by people who have an agenda, who are trying to make money out of us. So we've almost got no chance of finding the truth. It's almost impossible to know what's real and what's true and what's not, which is why my kind of litmus test is, well, maybe if it was likely that's how people were living before civilization and we were evolved to adapt to it, it probably is more likely to be carrying some truth. And obviously through science, awareness, we have improvements on the human condition, but they ought to be based on the benchmark that got us here in the first place. Because I think at the end of the day, we can't know everything. And so I try and pick a few things to really read about. I'm really interested in artificial intelligence and the future and where that takes our world. Really interested in AI. So I'm reading Max Tegmark. He's got a book called Life 3.0. Really interesting. The opening of it is quite sort of shocking. It's almost like a movie at the beginning, especially where he takes it afterwards. But I'm just picking a few things and I'm thinking, what's important to me, my family, my business, and my immediate group, and what do I need to know to not make poor decisions?
Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of doing my best. I think we're all just fighting through a fog of bullshit where you really can't trust what comes up on your news feed or your Instagram feed or.
Well, it's a conversation that I had recently about and I'm going to word it better because it kind of turned into a little bit of a shit show. And what I meant is, it's the first time Donald Trump, when he became president, it was the first time that a president of the United States, a person of power, was like, guys, fake news. Like, this is, you can't trust the media. This is bullshit. Yeah. And everybody was like, it's the first time that term was really like, oh, wait a minute. It is fake news. And now we're seeing, and let alone the social media and the snippets and the clips and people just trying to get attention because we're in this attention economy that people want to get. So it's hard to get news. But then what's the opposite of that? Like I'm thinking 80s, 90s, you go to a doctor, you see him for 10 minutes, he's going to tell you, a one-liner like, don't do this, do that, new stuff. Like you had no information.
I think that
other than your neighbors.
I think there was a happy place about 10 to 15 years ago where, well, the reason I'm going to say this is for a really simple idea. I don't know what it was like here because I was in the UK, but and we have institutions like the BBC, which is publicly owned and has its publicly owned news service, which doesn't mean it's unbiased, by the way. There's always bias, conscious or otherwise. But the thing that I liked about the idea of being a journalist, when you publish in a newspaper or a magazine, or you go on TV in a proper documentary TV show, like a 60 Minutes or whatever, you are held to account by editors. And if you lie and if you make stuff up, you would lose your ability to be a journalist. No one's going to employ you.
You wouldn't grow.
So it's a little bit like being a doctor and having peer review, or being a doctor and doing double-blind placebo trials on huge populations to see whether a thing is real or not. Those things, there are methods to work out truth. And I think in the past, if you actually went on to a TV show like 60 Minutes and said something, if it wasn't backed up, it's not going to get made. People are going to go, well, wait a minute, is this guy for real? Is it true? But I think what's happened now is because that was broadcasting, where people who were given, and they'd have their own agenda, obviously, and they'd have their biases, but there had to be enough truth in what they said to be allowed to write it in a newspaper, apart from the National Enquirer maybe, but to write it in a magazine or a newspaper or put it on a TV documentary. They had to have a degree of professional integrity, and you have to be a card-carrying journalist.
Of course.
To go to a press conference. You show your ID, and who do you work for? I work for the New York Times. Great, you can come in. You can be in this press conference. Whereas now, news is whatever you or I choose to put on YouTube.
Yeah.
And if people like it and it's popular, it becomes truth.
Like the flat earthers.
Yeah, and I think there's a thing that's I can't remember the phrase, so I'm going to say it wrong. But, if you tell a lie often enough, it turns into the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we're suffering from right now. I mean, the flat earth thing, I think, is incredible. It's an incredible outcome of a generation of people that are almost post-science. Like, we've all grown up with this really obvious idea of how the universe is constructed. And that knowledge and the proof and the burden of proof on it is improving week by week, minute by minute, as they discover new things and look at the mechanics.
It changes
of the planets.
And it moves.
Yeah, but usually they add new, cool, interesting stuff to
Right.
it. Meanwhile, there's a whole bunch of people that said, nah, bullshit, the Earth is flat. I saw a really funny video of some guys trying to prove the Earth was flat with a laser light on a boat. And as the boat sailed over the horizon, the laser was no longer shining on the boat. And they went, oh. And they'd realized they'd actually proved the curvature of the Earth.
Flat Earth, there's a proof.
There was a guy telling me that the Earth had to be flat because when planes are flying, they'd always have to have their nose slightly down to fly round the curvature of the Earth, and that's not how they fly. I'm like, oh my God, because people don't get into if I was really curious if the Earth was flat, I'd start looking at the science. I wouldn't read memes, I'd read encyclopedias.
Wasn't it Galileo that proved it, or one of the Greek scientists with the stick in two different cities 200-300 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Put a stick here, and then put a stick in two cities down, and at the same time, this stick makes a shadow, and this one doesn't.
And I know a guy, and I'm not going to say who he is, I know a guy who's a flat earther, and he flies all over the world in planes.
And he thinks, well, it's
flat. How do you think the pilots navigate? And why do you think it is when they fly from New York to London, they go over Greenland and Iceland?
Right.
On a globe, they do this. It's because it's the shortest route on a globe.
Instead of going around the planet, yes.
Because in fact, the Earth is about 3.5 miles thicker at the equator than it is, because it's not round, it's actually a slight oval because it spins.
Which is another fun thing that people don't know about. Africa is a lot bigger than what it is on the actual maps because they can't, like if you look at the real globe, you'll see how bigger Africa really is.
Yeah, because the map is a two-dimensional
2D,
extrapolation of a 3D object. So there's all this stuff, and I think it's really frightening that we live in a world where people are so easily fed bullshit and believe it.
Well, the problem with that is that nobody has any real worries. There's plenty of food. There's no food. It's like gender roles. You know, somebody made the statement of, you think there's a problem with gender roles of who's doing what in Ukraine right now? There's not. Women are getting out and the men are fighting. End of story. Yeah. And when shit hits the fan, everybody defaults to gender role. But here, since there's nothing serious in the last, 20 years, 30 years, there's no drafts, there's no nothing. The world's flat, oat milk today, whole milk. We're nitpicking now.
But also, I don't know about you, but when I was like 15, 20, there's a period in my life where I was new to adulthood and it wasn't fair. Life wasn't fair. I didn't like the man. I didn't like the government. I didn't like the police. I didn't like anything I like now. And because I wasn't making good money, I didn't own property, I didn't have a family, I was a young, angry kid and I didn't understand. I mean,
life's unfair.
I grew up in the 70s and, there was a real threat of nuclear annihilation. We used to have these kind of hide under the table in a nuclear, paint the windows white when the 4-minute warning goes. We used to have the 4-minute warning in the UK. And we grew up in this fear when I was a kid of oppression, like we're going to die and we're going to blow the planet up. And I grew up angry, like who are these awful people that are going to blow the world up? And I wanted to ban the bomb, change the world. My dad was a banker. I thought he was an embarrassment, making money out of selling stuff that nobody wanted just to make money. I remember having an argument with him and saying, you buy pork bellies when you don't want to eat pork bellies, and then you sell them to other people who want pork bellies just to make more money. And
you were mad at that.
I was mad. And I was mad with everything. And I think young people
Don't you sell pork bellies right now?
I think, but it's a different...
I
know. Maybe we get a second teenager in our 50s.
Right.
But for me, when we're, if you look at a pride of lions, as soon as that big young male lion is big enough to challenge the leader of the pack, he takes him out.
Right.
And our job as teenagers is to rebel and to go, wait a minute, what the hell? Why am I not the boss? And meanwhile, the patriarchs will keep you down until you're big enough to take them on and take them out. When you extend that to society, you've got an awful lot of young people full of vitriol and anger and frustration and a feeling of disempowerment because they don't own a car yet, they don't have a house, they don't have a stake in life, they don't have a job and a career, yet they're physically adult. And so they get out there and they protest and they want to be angry and they want to change and they don't like anything. And and the whole idea of the gender question. I mean, I really don't care what someone's gender identification is. I literally don't care. Are you a nice person? Are you not a nice person?
And the story.
If you want to make it complicated, I probably get it wrong. Like if you want me to call you something weird, I'm sorry, I'm old, I'll get it wrong, but please don't take it personally. I don't object to you. I'm just set in my ways. But it's kind of, but growing up, young people just went through a little bit of confusion for some and others didn't. But now that's almost empowered. It's almost like, well, you need to have some sort of gender fluidity until you know who you are. I mean, it's a new interpretation of just young people's frustration and young people finding their way.
Right.
And, we've enabled this over exploration. And of course, as we get older and more wise, as we were talking about earlier, as we approach a bit of wisdom, we look at these young people making their lives way more complicated than they need to be, being way too angry about stuff that really doesn't matter and nobody cares. And we think it's laughable and stupid. And then we end up with this kind of Gen Z or baby boomers, Gen X versus Gen whatever, millennial bullshit thing.
Right.
But it's just the stage that we're at in our lives. They're at stage stupid. Well, great.
Right.
When you're all 50, 55, 60, you'll look back and you'll go,
what the fuck?
What an idiot I was.
What a waste of time.
But on the other hand, it creates change and sometimes that's interesting. I mean, the problem with us old people ruling the planet is that we're not around for long, and unless you've got kids, it's not easy to keep an eye on what the world will look like in 100 years. It's like our politicians. They're only in power for 4 years. So,
next,
they're looking at what's right in front of them. They haven't got their head up looking at the apex of the corner. They're looking at their front wheel going, where's my bike pointing right now? And they're the ones that are going to crash, because they're not looking at where they want to go. They're looking at where they're pointing.
Right.
And they're focused on the now. I mean, there always used to be this thing about Japanese politicians and economists would look at 50-year plans. Whereas here we look at, well, the politicians go, well, what's going to get me voted in next? What's popular? What's going to look good? So I think, it's generational, and I think it'd be a terrible time to be a young person. How confusing. I mean, Jesus, I wouldn't want to be, I got 14-year-old and a 21-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
Their world is so much more complicated than mine was.
Well, there was one that I heard that just I couldn't even imagine. The whole bullying thing, like in our time, if there was somebody bullying somebody, as soon as school was over, the bullying stopped. It was over. You go home. That's your safe. If I hate school, you tell your parents, I don't want to go. There's a bully, this, that. Your parents make a scene in the story. But now you hear about, after school, people go home, and they get home and they look at their social media and bully, and take a picture. And look, you picked your nose and you picked your butt and you had a wedgie and then fuck you. And it's so negative and disgusting that there's no escaping it. And then you're being judged by so many people. We were never meant to be judged by thousands of people. And you have these girls that are 14, 15, 16, 17, and the world's like, you're ugly, you're fat, you're disgusting, you're skinny, you're anorexic. The guy, you're too tall, you're too short. Like it's pretty raw, man. And kids don't have the filter to like, oh, they don't mean this or this is, they're dealing with their own thing. So it's terrifying. I would not want to be a child.
No, I think it's awful, because the thing is,
those are examples.
I've got a phone in my pocket right now, and if you said, hey, Dutch, let's pause for a minute, I'm going to go to the restroom. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get my phone out and just check and have a look. And if there's nothing on my email or of interest, I might just look at Instagram, and then suddenly I'm just looking at bullshit. Now, I'm a grown adult man who didn't grow up with this device until about, when did the iPhone come out? 2007? So until then, I had none of this shit. So it's
well, social media didn't take off.
So none, Facebook, Instagram, none of that existed. Yet,
2013,
even at this age,
I think.
Yeah, even at this, so 10 years, even at this age, after a decade, I'm now programmed to grab my phone. Like if I'm watching a movie, and there's an ad break, because I'm too cheap to pay the full subscription and I'm allowing ad breaks, I'm on my phone. And I wake up in the morning, and me and Vicky, my wife, the first thing we do is look at our phones. I mean, it's partly because we're checking UK emails.
Right, but right after that.
But it's like, why am I looking at my phone? Like, leave it out. You shouldn't have to be doing that. And I think you take the power of the endorphins that has created for us as adults and give that to a 14-year-old. They're powerless.
Forget about it.
And, I've got a 17-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old daughter. And both of them have had their real challenges with social media and who they are on their phones. And, my daughter was doing stuff that we'd agreed she would never do on her phone. So we were like, we're going to take your phone away and you have to delete that Instagram account that you've got because you broke all the rules. And her biggest anxiety was not, can I message my friends and, will people be able to reach me? It was losing her 900 followers. Now, when you're 15, how do you know 900 people? You don't. Right. You don't know 900 people. I mean, they say an adult can know about 110 people before we start forgetting people.
Right.
As an active human, we operate in groups of around 100, which is why Roman centurions are about 100, a brigade is about 100. There are lots of things that show how about 100 people, and when a company's about 100, 110 people, you can know everyone's name and all that kind of thing. But no one knows 900 people when they're 15. There's a whole bunch of fake people, some dodgy older guys pretending to be younger guys. There's all kinds of predatory people there. There are
predators,
fake profiles. Yeah. And I remember going through her phone going, well, who's that? And then who's that? She was going, oh, but I've got all these friends. And I said, well, let's have a look. Well, this person has got no posts. And this person's got no posts, and this person's got no posts. Who are they?
But more importantly, what are you posting that
Yeah.
you need to show 900 people?
But
are you teaching? Are you educating? Are you offering some kind of...
Gathering likes, because it's like walking around with a rating. So you're walking around with a little badge that goes, I'm a 5-star person, I'm a 4-star person, I'm a 3-star person. It's ever present. And I think we even do it now. Like, you know, if somebody messages me on Instagram and says, hey, Dutch, I really love what you're doing at Bike Shed and I'd really like to come and work for you, or I've got a great business idea and I think you should hear it, I will go on his Instagram and look at him, and I'll judge by what he's posted and how many followers he's got and how he describes himself, whether he's somebody that I'm going to reply to.
Right.
Because it's the only metric I've got. I don't have his
Right.
I don't have his resume.
A CV,
but I'm gonna
resume.
have a look. So I can understand why people rate our success. They go, oh, you've got 1.5 million followers on Bike Shed's combined social media, or you reach 1.2 million people a week, or even, I've got 11,000 followers on my personal Instagram. That's not because I'm amazing. It's because I'm Dutch from the Bike Shed, and Bike Shed tags me in. And so people go, oh, follow that guy. But I'm not particularly interesting. I don't say anything great. Mostly it's pictures of my bike. And when I look at my feed, it's all the same thing over and over again. But people will go, oh, you've got a following of your own. You're an influencer. I'm like, I'm really not any kind of influencer.
Right.
I'm just some dude who runs a business, and I get tagged in by my business profile. But people see it as a measure, and I think that's so dangerous. And we judge other people's success and popularity and relevance based on how many people follow them. And then there's all these people out there trying to sell me follows. Like, oh, I
all day.
Yeah, and it's like, oh,
tons of them.
You know, for $100, I can have another 2,000 followers. And you
What,
can
2,000? They're offering 20,000, 30,000 followers. Like, what?
It's kind of like, you know, these farms of follow the companies that...
I think it's AI now.
Yeah, probably.
I think it's AI because it's too many random people with the same message. And I'm like, well, what are they doing?
But isn't that awful if you're a teenage kid? Because I can judge my success by a marriage, having children, by my job titles, my resume, you know, what I've done with my life. But if you're 17 and you still live at home, and all you've really got is, you know,
your BMX
your outfit
bike
and your boobs or whatever, and you're going to get likes because you want to look hot that day. Yeah, what a horrible way to grow up into the world.
And what's that going to turn you into later on? Now you're going to be stressing about your next outfit, the next shirt. I can't. You took a picture with that shirt. I can't take that shirt. Like it's problematic. But then, like you said, businesses look at that. Now, when you want to get a job, people look at social media.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't get jobs because their social medias are.
Yeah.
I mean, I've looked at people's Facebook profiles before and thought, I'm going to dodge that guy.
I was going to ask. So you have done that?
Yeah, I've done that because you find out about
what have you seen that you're like, red flag?
I've seen people doing some really heavy political rants, and I don't really care what their politics is, but I'm thinking, do I want that person as part of my business?
Right.
Because we're very much about common ground, and if somebody's got a public profile out there and they're really shouting about something they feel strongly about, it's going to affect how we're judged if they're in a senior management position. Because there's a lot we can all disagree about in the world, but
100%.
When you really look at it, we agree on most things. We mostly agree, we agree on being honest, freedom, working hard, you know.
We want to live, we want to survive, we don't want to hurt.
Being free to do what we want to do, a life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all agree in those basic ideas. But we're so focused on, well, do you support Gaza or Israel? I don't know.
Why do I have to choose?
I mean, Jesus,
I don't even know what's going on.
You know, I just see loads of people with guns killing people without guns. It's all bad. I don't like any of it. I'm not going to have an opinion. I'm not qualified. And you can see merits and disasters on both sides, but everyone has to have an opinion. And it's the same with the sort of gender fluid, gender identity thing. People can get very passionate about being super liberal. People can get very passionate about being super conservative about it and saying men are men and women are women and it's in your chromosomes, deal with it. And the thing is, what I want people to do is be reminded of the things we agree on, because it's okay to disagree about stuff. It's okay to sit across from someone on a table who completely disagrees with you about something as boring as gender identity.
Right.
Because if we completely disagreed on gender identity, you're still somebody who's becoming a friend of mine. You're a member of our club. You're a customer. I like you. Why would I let that get in the way of all the things we agree on? I couldn't give a shit. I'm not going to suddenly get angry with you about it. And I think, that we focus so much on the things we disagree on. And social media amplifies that because you get the echo chambers of what you already think. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face going forward, is that we're this fragmented society of people that are angry with each other for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, as an outsider in America, even,
And hanging on to it.
yeah, but even coming to America as an outsider, I see Americans, but Americans see Republicans and Democrats. I don't really see that. I see a whole bunch of people that are really similar, that
So,
are
yeah.
all doing pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
And the political spectrum between Democrat and Republicans about here and the rest of the world, it extends this way, from dictatorships to communism. You guys are all in the middle, and along with Europe and the UK, we're all only go from here to here. There's some
Right.
really extreme stuff out here, and no one's playing in that realm. And so I think we just need to be reminded a little bit that we agree on way more stuff, and that's what we should focus on.
I think the thing is, what you're saying is, if you look at the whole board, you're right. Most people are here in the middle. It's just the people on the far right and the far left, these guys are making noise.
Yeah.
And that noise is what's being, clickbait and news. But overall, the whole country is kind of like, no. Same thing. I give the example of, people say, strangers, watch out, strangers. I go, guys, we jump on fucking the 101 freeway, the 405 freeway with thousands of other people on death machines. If we were going to hurt each other, like that would be where it would happen. On the freeway, in traffic, tempered with a 5,000 pound, 3,000 pound, and just start murdering. But we don't. We all want to get home. We're all minding our own business. We're all listening to our own music, and we want to go to work. We want to get to our families or whatever party. That's it. Like it's safe. Overall, we're good. And then what's funny to go against that, any problem I've ever had was never with a stranger. It was always people closest to me. It's always a family member or a friend that robbed you or took advantage of you or lied to you or used this of you. It was never a stranger that just randomly. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's a lot less.
Well, I think the problem is when stuff does happen that's shocking, and don't get me wrong. I mean, LA's got a serious problem with violent, dangerous crack addicts living on the street who are homeless, who might stab you in the eye with a screwdriver. Because
LA's an exception.
that happens. It's real. I mean,
LA, New York, and Miami. There are certain cities.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. Because Vicky and I were attacked by a homeless man in downtown.
Really?
Yeah, really bad, with a big fucking knife.
Oh my God.
And we were lucky to get away with it unscathed. It was really bad, and police involved, and the whole 9 yards.
And again, I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
It could have been a fatal attack. But my point is, things like that are unusual, but they're the things that make the headlines. So when something does happen where some stranger, I think I was reading on the news yesterday that some guy who's like some pillar of the community, who's involved in all these charities, homeless woman went into his house and just shot him. And everybody's really confused. Like, why did she pick him? Did he know her? Didn't he know her? They've got no relationship. Because
where did she get the gun from?
Outlying news makes the news. Unusual stuff, because otherwise it wouldn't be in the news. When people do go crazy on the freeway and shoot people over a parking incident that they had earlier in the parking lot, that makes news because mostly we're all driving on the freeway in our lane, just trying to get home.
That's it.
But what we're given as information is, the 0.1% of weird stuff that happens. And that's also true for the way I think young people absorb social media because, going back to what we were talking about earlier, although they're part of this huge populations of however many billion humans there are on Earth, what they see is the extraordinary outliers who've been really successful. And so you judge yourself against the worst of the worst and the best of the best. We did an event here, and it was an influencer summit. So there were about 24 people went up on stage in front of an audience of 400 or 500 wannabe influencers and told them the formulas for how to be popular on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and all those things.
Right.
And Snapchat. And they all got up, they were experts, and they all had between 1 million and 20 million followers each. And I sat in on some of it. We've got a social media channel, maybe I'm going to learn something. And they talked about thumbnails and hashtags and titling, all the stuff you're getting targeted at.
Right.
With these people saying, hey, Bob, do this, and you're going to do that.
You'll blow up.
It's going to blow up and it's going to go crazy. But really, what it was an audience full of people looking at the success story, looking at the 1%. And the 1%'s advice, when you really boil it down, was be better.
Right.
It would be like going
consistent.
to a guitarist conference, and everyone in the audience is sitting there with their guitar, and Slash is on stage, and he's there being a guru, telling you how to be a rich and famous guitarist.
What a great analogy.
So Slash is up there and he goes, well, first of all, you need to be really good.
Right.
So go get really good. Be a really good guitar player because you need good playing. Then you need some great songs. So they've got to be hits. So write some hits. That's number 2. So first be really good.
Yeah.
Next, write some hits. Then, of course, you need a band. And the band have to be really, really good.
Badass.
So you need a band. And then they've got to be signed with a record deal. So go get a record deal, tick. And then everyone has to love your stuff and you have to get radio airplay and TV shows and be on MTV. And then people will buy your stuff and then you'll be rich and tick. And this is the formula for how to be a rich and famous guitarist. Just like me, I'm Slash from Guns N' Roses. This is how you do that. And everybody's there going, this is what you do. And it's like, what they're really telling you is be better.
Right.
Make better content, be more engaging, be interesting, be likable, be relevant.
Yeah, work your ass off
you know,
and be consistent.
And I think everybody thinks they can take the shortcut by following some formula.
Right.
I mean, if people listen to your podcast and watch your videos, it's because they like what you do. There's nowhere else to go with that.
Right.
They either like it or they don't like it.
Right.
I mean,
and the story.
And you can.
And they'll like some and they won't like others.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if you get the advantage of being famous beforehand, like a Joe Rogan, and you get a whole crowd and you get amazing guests as a result, and all the rest of it, you can snowball. And there's a whole tipping point thing that everybody kind of has read about in marketing.
But then it's still back to consistency and
So
hitting the board.
Yeah, you've just got to do the job, right? And I think young people just don't want to hear it. And I think now even
because they hear
older than young people don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
They don't, I've been told so many times how lucky I am.
Yeah.
Oh, Dutch, you were so lucky you got into the bike thing just at the right point. And I'm like,
it's the hardest fucking business to be in.
Firstly, it doesn't make you rich, by the way. Don't do it. It doesn't make you rich. And secondly, the harder I work, the luckier I am.
Yeah.
And there's no luck involved. There is zero luck.
My favorite definition of luck is when opportunity meets preparation. When opportunity and preparation meet, that's luck. That's luck.
I mean, you can be unlucky and you can be lucky, but at the end of the day,
and it happens.
The consistent daily doing the job and doing it to the best of your ability, and people either like it or they don't.
It happens. I've always wondered because I've seen the person open up a restaurant and spend a lot of money and invest in artwork and food and this, that. And for whatever reason, they couldn't survive long enough to be successful and they had to close down the doors. And then you're like, oh man, that was such a good place. Why did that place close? And I know restaurant business overall is just crazy, but then a new person takes over, and the service sucks, the food sucks, the experience kind of sucks, and they succeed, and they last. They went past the hump, and they're doing great. And there's a restaurant. I don't want to say its name, but it's right by where I live in Studio City, and this place has been there since the 70s, and they do tacos, but they do the worst tacos. Like they do a shittier version of Taco Bell tacos.
Yeah.
Not carne asada, none of that. And I went there one time just to try it out because I'm like, oh, this place has been here since 1977. Must be amazing. And I was like, do you have carnitas, carne asada? Do you have this? Nope. And I was like, well, what do you have? They're like ground beef. And I go, okay, like, can I get a corn tortilla? Nope, flour tortilla or hard shell. And I'm like, oh man. Can I get okay, I'll do that. Let me get a horchata or Jamaica. They're like, no, we have Coke, Pepsi, and Sprite. Like, but it's still there. So there is this weird luck thing, or what's for someone is for someone, because I have seen really good businesses fail.
Sometimes timing. And also the
economy
that you're in. I mean, 2019, we modeled this business in 2019. So we're coming to America, 2017, 18, we're going to open Bike Shed, 2019, do a business plan. All the economies around doing what we do in restaurant, retail, and events were completely different. So we make half the money we forecast in 2019 in 2023 because of the economy, the actor strikes, the writer strikes, post-COVID, and everything costs more money. Everything costs 30% more, and people are spending another 20, 30% less, and you just end up making less money because the environment and the market pre-COVID and post-COVID in Los Angeles are entirely different. And there's been a huge sort of loads of people have left, an exodus of people with money and creative people leaving for other states and cities to go and do work where they get better paid and there are lower taxes and less sort of hassle. And LA's changing. And so right now, it's a different economic environment. And I think sometimes when places have been around a long time, what they benefit from is fame. And you need to be around a long time. And so if you're there at the sweet spot in certain economies, when you're around when a thing is happening, or a street or an area is buzzing and bustling and exciting, you can be carried on that wave. And then a decade later, you're an institution.
Right.
And I always make the barbershop analogy. So you open a barbershop and you put a lot of effort into marketing and promoting it. And you tell all your friends and you go out there and you put leaflets everywhere. And week one, everyone's coming to get their hair cut, and it's awesome. And you get full chairs every week. And then week two, you go, oh, where is everybody? What happened? We were popular.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is all your week one people are going to come back in week 4 or week 5 because you get your hair cut once a month.
Right.
So you've got to have another round in week 2 of the same work and another round in week 3. Now, if you keep going, when you get to week 4 and week 5, your week 1 people are back on top. And now you've got more people getting their hair cut.
Right.
So you've got to feed the beast for enough
survive,
cycles.
of course.
And I remember meeting somebody who came into Bike Shed about a year ago, and he said, oh, this is my favorite place in LA, the food, the service, the vibe. It's incredible. He said, I don't even ride a bike, but me and my wife love this place. This is possibly our favorite spot. And I'm like, Graham, when did you come here last? And he said, oh, it was just after you opened. And I was like, that was 10, 11 months ago. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, we're your favorite place in LA.
And you're only going once or
and you're
twice?
going to come here once or twice a year. And because LA's got so much choice. So as a business, whatever you do, you've got to build the returning customer. And if your returning customer comes 3 times a year and you're trying to do 300 covers a day, how many people do you need as your total customer base to supply that many people over and over again consistently until you're full? And then your year on year is in incremental growth. And that's why I think
some businesses don't make it. But some places open up and it's just a lottery.
Yeah.
Like they hit and it's just flowing in and flowing in. And again, those are the exceptions. I get it. That's not all the time. But and I know restaurant business overall is it's a little gray area. I got 2 questions for you. One, LA versus London, because we briefly talked about how the problems here are different than the problems there, but they both have their problems and their situations. And then another question that we were talking about, now that you said the whole COVID thing, if you would have waited a year or 2, fuck that, Bike Shed doesn't exist. Would you open up Bike Shed in LA today?